did you build the agency around a sale?
I never built the agency to sell it. I never thought it was a sellable product. I never wanted to sell it.
Fine.
I never believed selling it was the answer. I saw it as a cash flow cow at that point.
Fine.
And I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I just got made an offer I couldn't refuse.
You get this offer. You can't refuse it. Can you disclose how much?
I can't, but I can say it was more money than I'll ever need.
Today I'm joined by Simon Squibb. This has been a long time coming. I wanted to get Simon on because he had a huge exit in an agency and among many other things. And we're going to unravel that today. And I think it's going to be a hugely valuable video for you. So firstly, Simon, thank you so much for agreeing to do this, man. You've got quite an incredible zero to hero story. And I'd like to touch on that first of all to introduce you to the audience. Can you explain to everybody the process of you essentially being homeless before your journey of entrepreneurship and how that even happened?
Yeah, so I was 15 years old when I had an argument with my mother and she kicked me out of home. Mm-hmm. And I found myself on the streets and for the first time in my life wondering, well, how am I going to earn a living? What shall I do? And so I went to social services and they kind of initially didn't even recognize that I had a problem. They didn't kind of believe me. So I was forced to basically wake up the entrepreneurial muscle in my brain. And a week after being homeless, I started a gardening company.
Interesting. How did that come about?
So I often describe it when I look back as almost like luck. I was desperate and I didn't have a national insurance card. And for your listeners in the UK, you need one to get a job. And so I didn't have one and I didn't have an address. So literally I can't get a job, even if I want to, not in any supermarket or anywhere. So I was desperate and walked past a big house in Cambridge that had a messy garden and something in my brain woke up for the first time. I call it the entrepreneurial muscle. And I thought, that's not right. There's a beautiful house there with a messy garden. So something said to me, go and ask if you can take care of that person's garden. And they probably got money because they got a big house and they just don't have time to maybe take care of the garden. So I just went up to the front door of that house, knocked on the door and said, hi, my name's Simon Squibb and I've got a gardening company. Would you like me to take care of your garden? Just kind of instinct. And I'd never been that way before. School never taught me to be an entrepreneur, that's for sure. And to my surprise, that person said, oh, great. Actually, I do need some help. I haven't had time. It's really busy at the moment. How much do you charge? And I just picked a number out of the air. I said, £200 a month. And they said, sure, let's give it a go. And something woke up in me that day. And I realized that I could start a business. £200 was a lot of money. And so then I decided to go and knock as many doors as I could. It was a Saturday that day to see how many people would let me take care of their gardens for a fixed monthly fee. And to my shock, I knocked on probably over 120 doors. I got 11 people to say, sure, take care of my garden.
That's awesome. It's that initial proof of concept, isn't it? That only one yes that you need to give you that confidence to then go ahead and then knock on all them other doors.
It's true because I often think back to that time. If that first person had said no, I would have just thought, okay, it's not a business. It's not an opportunity. I wouldn't have knocked on the second door or the third door. I was lucky that first person said yes.
Isn't it that's such a great shame in itself? And I think there's so many people at a danger at starting a business and then getting told no that first time because so many people, you're way more likely to get that no than you are the 100%. Yes.
I mean, since then, I've started 19 companies and nearly every single one of those businesses since that business, the first person I ever pitched the idea to said no.
Right, yeah.
So just pure luck, fate, thank God. I don't know what to call it, but if that hadn't been a yes, then I wouldn't have realized what was possible. And next business I started, which was an accommodation business, the first person I pitched it to said, never in a million years, no, Simon. But I'd already learned that it wasn't really about the first person saying yes, it was about follow through, persistence.
Fine. But you'd been taught those basic business principles from that initial business.
Yeah, through desperation.
I think a lot of people maybe would presume that when you jump into a business, you're kind of stuck in that world for a period of time. But you just said you've started 19 businesses since then. How have you compartmentalized jumping from business to business and when is the right time to move on to something new?
So two great questions there, by the way, and they're actually quite different. So make sure I don't forget the second part. But I think the first part is I have always enjoyed learning about marketing. I didn't realize when I was younger that knocking on someone's door and asking them to take care of their gardening was actually marketing.
Mm.
It was called sales back then, and now it's all being made fancy and people don't want to say they're in sales anymore. I don't know why, because I think it's a brilliant skill. But I was learning sales, and then it turned into learning marketing, because it's about presenting what you have to offer to the market in the best possible way with the maximum amount of scale, right? So in the early days, for me, that was knocking on someone's door and then knocking on as many doors as I could.
Mm-hmm.
But the principle stuck with me, that if you could get a client to say yes to something, you could build a business. And so throughout my whole career, and the reason I've been able to do so many businesses, many of them multiple businesses at the same time. And the reason I've been able to do that is because I've learned that income in equals growth.
Fine. But in managing multiple businesses, that's not an easy feat within its own. In managing multiple businesses, like, it's incredible. I mean, some people struggle to just manage the one business that they've got in front of them.
Yeah.
And just something that I've always found quite interesting myself. I mean, I've at a point I've had 3 businesses running at the same time, trying to be the active manager of all 3 of those businesses, and even that I found incredibly stressful. And I actually stopped running one of them so I could focus on the 2. How do you compartmentalize that? How do you deal with juggling multiple hats at once?
So I've learned this the hard way, what you're talking about. And I think I've come out the other end realizing how it needs to be done. And I wish someone had told me this when I was 21. It would have saved me a lot of stress. So the way to build a portfolio of businesses is kind of a couple of structures. The first is I have an investment portfolio. So when I invest in a business, and I've invested in 76 companies, I invest in the person running the company. And I am not running that company. I am there to help that person who runs that company. So if that person wakes up one day and says, I'm closing it, that's it. It's gone. Or that person wakes up and says, I'm completely changing it. That's it. They're completely changing it. And so the key is, don't get in there and start running it. Right? Understand what you've done. You've invested with a concept of helping, not a concept of running. The second way to do it, and again, I wish I'd understood this when I was younger, is I would start a business. And then, so for example, I started a company called Fluid, which we've mentioned. And then that business had highs and lows because it's an agency business. So I would have sometimes really talented people not doing anything, because a client would give us work and then they wouldn't give us work. And then they'd give us loads of work and then they wouldn't give us work. So I saw gaps in the cycle where I thought, right, well, why don't we start other businesses to use that labor and not have a downturn? So I was using the same labor pool, but creating multiple businesses. So I wasn't necessarily hiring extra people to do other businesses. So one of the things we did at Fluid is we built digital products, right? So when we had downtime, we worked on our own digital products. So I wasn't having to increase my labor force to build a whole different business. And the other thing I learned, and this is probably key, have one central purpose to the business. So some people start a barbershop and then they open up, say, a coffee shop, and then maybe they get into drop shipping and all of these businesses all in themselves could probably make money, but they don't have a common thread. They don't have a common purpose or common goal. And that's why I think it gets really messy. And I accidentally realized this for myself, that as long as I had a common purpose, a common team, I could do multiple things. And the best way maybe is to explain like a supermarket. The supermarket is there to provide you with access to food, right? And you could go online. You could argue that's a different business. And some have struggled because it kind of is. But you've also got the physical place. But inside the store, they use other people's products. They're not making tea, making the Frosties, although they have got into that over time. Initially, they stuck to their lane. They got real estate. They made it look nice. They did good marketing. They created foot traffic. And then they let all these brands supply them with products, right? As you get more mature in business and you have more profit, yes, then you can hire a team, as I'm sure Tesco's and Waitrose have done, where you then have your own range of products. But they didn't do that at the beginning. And I think that's key. Stick to your lane initially and go deep, not broad.
Fine. That makes perfect sense. And it's something that I always preach about a lot, is just sticking to one thing and doing that one thing really well. And I think that especially now in the online space, people are at a danger of trying to do 1,000 different things. And people bunny hop from business model to business model. And there's maybe like a top 5 popularized businesses like Amazon FBA and drop shipping and starting an agency and these kind of very glamorized businesses. And people very often jump from thing to thing. But you stumbled across and jumped into the agency industry before there was any kind of online hype, at least around, especially in the YouTube space, for example. How did you get into the agency space? And secondary to that, what was the value proposition that you brought to the market? Because you started that business in China, right?
Yes.
So, yeah.
Well, I guess sometimes in business, there's this kind of preconception that people sit down, come up with a brilliant idea, and then they go and execute it.
Mm-hmm.
And in my experience, that isn't how most businesses start. So I went to Hong Kong to have an experience. And when I got there, I met someone who was a brilliant creative.
Mm-hmm.
And I fancied her.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, it's not a big business plan I had. I thought she was an awesome designer, and she is an awesome designer. And I said, I'm going to help you promote yourself better because you are so shy, but you are so talented. And I asked her how much she was charging for this magazine that she was doing, and my jaw dropped. It was so cheap. So I said, we're going to add 2 zeros to this, and I'm going to take care of the clients for you because she didn't like dealing with the rate negotiation. And a business was born. Mm-hmm. And I was motivated by a kind of sense of injustice that she was being taken advantage of and not being paid properly,
mm-hmm.
alongside fancying her. You know, and I know probably not allowed to say that these days in the world we live in today, but I just felt like, hey, I want to help this person and I also like her.
Yeah.
So let's start a business together. And it turned out she liked me too. So that all worked out. We got married and have a baby now.
Awesome. Love that. So you found essentially talent, and the core of any agency is an exceptional service, right? And so the service was what? Graphic design?
So interestingly enough, I always believe run towards something when everyone else is running away from it.
Okay.
So I started in 2001. This is the .com bust.
Mm-hmm.
So everybody had gone bust. And Hong Kong, where I actually set up, was one of the epicenters of the finance was coming for .com businesses. Everybody had lost their shirt and their friend's shirt in the .com collapse. Perfect time to start a digital agency, which is what basically Fluid was. And so we initially started off doing everything that Ogilvy and Leo Burnett and all the big agencies didn't do. They'd all given up on digital, cut those teams, which meant loads of talent around as well.
Mm-hmm.
And no one was talking .com. That was like a dirty phrase for the first 3 or 4 years of building Fluid. If I ever said, let's build your website, people would say, no one cares about buying stuff online, Simon. No one cares. So we were really the only one left in the market, but we were brand new. So actually what was interesting that people were doing things like email marketing, and they were still doing marketing stuff. So when I worked with Helen, who she's a creative, and I'm marketing, suddenly we were very unique because we were doing design and marketing with a digital edge, and none of the big players in China were doing that.
Yeah.
There was all these startups that are now very big, didn't exist back in those days. So we were there at the very beginning of what I would call the new Silicon Valley, which was Shenzhen, China at that time, new Silicon Valley with big businesses building out ability to sell online.
Yep.
But everybody who was anybody had run away from that space, and no one was investing in building a digital agency and like we did. So we owned the market.
Interesting. So there's yourself and your 2B partner starting off this agency. And to give us just an idea of kind of can you give us an idea of what revenue level you scaled that agency to, and what kind of employee number you were at the peak?
So I ran an interesting model that I had a core team of 50 people in the company that were on payroll. And then we worked with a whole slew of freelancers to deal with the big project, finish the project, next project, big project. So we would basically, and interestingly enough, and I'm sure, I know it's still the same today, you go pitch for a project.
Yes.
So we won CNN, for example, and to do the CNN work, we needed an extra 15 people. Mm-hmm. But interestingly, the agency that lost CNN suddenly had 15 people available.
Okay.
So, it was often just about the idea, and then the execution. There was always great people around because the agency pool would move around with you. So that's how we operated the business. And I always thought about the company as like 200 people in my mind, but on full-time payroll was a lot less. But if we needed to scale up, there was all these freelancers across Asia that we would tap into. And at any one time, we'd have 200 people that we were paying to do work with us.
Fine. And so what would you say? Because obviously that's a huge amount of work, which, I mean, we operate obviously I own an agency, we operate in a very lean model. There's only 10 of us. We're doing around 150K a month at the moment. So it's kind of large profit margin for the amount of, large revenue for the amount of team members we have, right, essentially. But certainly not at a scale of 550 people in the team or 200 people, including freelancers. To me, sounds like an incredibly stressful business as far as an agency is concerned, because I think there's a lot of moving parts in an agency. So what were some of the main challenges that you had to face in scaling an agency to that level? And what was the time span? What time span are we talking from? How many years to actually get from you two starting off to actually that kind of 50 employee point?
Yeah, so it's a really interesting journey, and I don't talk about it much because I think it's something that only other agency people would perhaps understand. The industry is quite, I guess, closed circuit around this.
Yeah.
So like I mentioned, the talent pool is kind of interconnected.
Yes.
If an agency loses a client, they have to get rid of those people. There's no work for them anymore.
Yeah.
So basically, long story short, it took 15 years to grow this business from zero to the point where a company like PricewaterhouseCoopers would buy it.
Yeah.
15 years. So it's not an overnight success. And when I look at the highs and lows of building that business, one of the big lessons I learned and I now apply in my life today is that it's actually easier to run a big company than a small company. So I found 5 people in the agency to be a really nice number. That was a really nice lifestyle business, up to about 15 people.
Yeah.
Really nice lifestyle business. You kind of know everyone's name, you know their families. It's really friendly. It's all personal. You can say no to work still. And it was really, really personal. I found it really painful once you got to about 30, 35, because you haven't got enough for middle management, like senior middle management. So you're now dealing with everyone's personal holiday requests. If you're the boss of the business, you're dealing with the client's demands and everyone's individual personal needs. Yeah. I found that to be quite difficult. As soon as we got kind of towards the 45 mark and you could start to bring in really senior people, I found it a lot less stressful. So I actually brought in someone to run the agency, and he was amazing. And I don't know if he'd like me to call him out today, but when I brought him in, my life, I basically didn't need to sell that business.
Fine.
It was running brilliantly with him running it. And I wouldn't have been able to bring him in to run it if I hadn't got the revenue up to a point where I could afford senior people. Yeah. And so I found, oddly, that I was always scared of a really big business, lots of people. But I've learned that the best thing is either keep it small and enjoy the lifestyle and accept that, or go big.
Interesting. The majority of people that I would say would be watching this, or at least the majority of people, let's say I work with in my education business, we are really maximum scaling to that 15 employee point. Because I think that space in between is something that's incredibly intimidating in the agency space. And I almost see the agency space as it is right now, just purely objectively, as a stepping stone into other business ventures. And I think because of how saturated the industry is, or sophisticated, I should say, it's not as attractive nor easy, or it's not easy at all, but it's not as attractive to actually get to that large point without having a very specific new modern spin.
I would argue that, and I built a lot of businesses, no business is easy to scale out.
Of course.
I don't care what it is. I mean, unless you've got a YouTube channel that's just, you put a video out, it does not much effort and it gets millions of views, then great. But that's very rare and actually doesn't happen either. It's very competitive to be a YouTuber today, right? It's very competitive to be a TikToker. It's all competitive. And in fact, if you're in early and you don't compete full on, you will lose out. Yeah. So and the agency business, actually, I loved it. Yeah. I fell in and out of love of it. And of course, your clients matter. Yes. And the team matters. But I felt I was actually shocked how profitable and successful it became. But I think what kept me in it was I enjoyed it. Fine. I enjoyed going to see a client and helping them make their business super successful with our brainpower. Yeah. I was proud when campaigns were up on billboards and on TV and we were making a difference to people's businesses. And I just got such a buzz from that. And there were years when we didn't make money. And we had the 2003, we had SARS in Hong Kong, which is like the COVID 1.0, and everything closed. And then we had 2008 financial crisis, and one of my big clients was Credit Suisse. They almost went bankrupt. I had really tough times, but I always enjoyed the fight. And I used to enjoy the competitive nature of the industry too. Like I'd walk past the Ogilvy and Leo Burnett and the big brand WPP folks, and we would walk with a bounce in our step into competing with those guys, and we would win. Like we would win against them, and that was exciting.
Where do you even begin to get the contract for a large conglomerate as far as an agency is concerned? Like, where do you even bid on that tender? Like, how would you even get access to that opportunity?
So there's a load of ways to get clients, of course. I think, you can make a YouTube channel and clients watch it and like it and go, cool, I'd like to work with you. Right? That's not every agency is doing that. Ogilvy aren't doing that.
Yeah.
But I think there are industry standards. So one of the things I think that I learned is my competitors, as I've mentioned them a few times as negative as my competitors, also can be your allies. So for the first 2 or 3 years of the business, Ogilvy was my competitor. And then I got to know the people there. We went to an award show. We won Agency of the Year in Hong Kong, which was a big deal.
Awesome.
And we were sitting on a table, we won that award. We were all excited to go up on stage, get the award. And on the table next to me is the team at Ogilvy. So then they were actually really lovely. They were like, congratulations. They won Global Agency of the Year. We won Local Agency of the Year. So somehow we were like in the same room as the industry folks. And I got talking to the CEO of Ogilvy at that time. And he said, you know what, Simon, we have conflict clients. We have clients that we're not allowed to do it because it's a complete competitor to the client we are working for. I'll pass them your way. And we kind of like started to have a bit of a support network for each other. And I stopped seeing them as direct competition. We still competed. We had to compete for some work. But then we started also seeing ways to work together. And they helped me get some big clients.
Interesting.
And equally at the same time, the other hack, I guess, that I discovered is every time there was a real talent in the market available, I'd hire them. And with that talent will come a certain client relationship or two.
Fine.
And a bit like Helen, who was my first, I guess, talent in the business, she brought with her clients. So I didn't, as a marketing person, I love finding clients, but the best thing to do actually was collaboration and also then bringing in talent, and their clients follow the talent.
So really, because a lot of agencies starting off now will start off with just basic sales outreach, cold calling, email marketing, and so on and so forth, getting into local businesses and working their way up the ladder. But really what we're saying is to get into those large, very big corporate deals, it's really network and it's personal relation rather than there's no advertisement that goes out on a website to say, hey, we need some graphic design right now. Who wants to bid for it? It's really who you know. Rather than some generic cold outreach to a large company hoping for the best.
I think it's a bit of both. I mean, there are tenders that go out every month. Big companies, British Gas and all these big organizations, they can't just give it to their mates.
No.
They have rules. And so those rules are tenders. So what we discovered in my company was that you have to go for the tenders, but you have to put a lot of work in to getting the work. And a lot of people don't want to do that. And I resisted it as well. I used to be very annoyed with some tenders because they get 10 companies to tender and they'd only pick one company. And often the tender was the actual work. So you could spend a month doing the work and then not get the work. But I learned to embrace it and see it as a way of, for the clients that you wanted, winning the work. Go and do the tenders if you want the work.
I had a really negative experience with a tender once with Cupra, Cupra. And they wanted a company to design this educational product for them, of which I won initially. And then I created this whole product for them. I got a 50% down payment for this project. And then they just took the rest of it. And in my ignorance or amateur nature at the start, I didn't have any kind of written termed contract or anything, and I was kind of lost out on that. So
yeah, well, it's your fault, not theirs. You should have done the paperwork, right?
Of course, but it's a lesson learned.
Exactly, and I think I've had exactly the same experience. I did a project with Estee Lauder, and we came up with a brand new brand for them in China, which they now use, and it's massive. We came up with the name.
Yeah.
And I was so excited about doing the work that in the contract, I said, if we design the brand, they have to pay us for it. But if we come up with the name, they can take it.
Right.
So because I wanted to get in there. And they technically on the contract, they were right. They never did anything wrong. I mucked up. I was so excited about helping Estee Lauder launch their first product in China.
Yeah.
It was such a big deal to do that.
Yeah.
It was the first time they'd ever used an external agency as well to come up with a brand that I said, we'll do the brainstorming bit for free. But if you pick our name and we do all the work on the digital marketing and the creative, then you pay us for that. But they only used us to do the concept, which they did take and they did use, but we didn't get paid the sort of multi-million pound we should have got paid.
Yeah.
And that's just a rookie mistake. But I don't blame the brand. They did everything right. And I'm still proud of the fact that we came up with a brand name that Estee Lauder now use in China that's massive.
It's at the end of the day, like, what else can you do? Nobody teaches you this stuff. And that's
not unless they're listening to this,
Exactly.
Get the paperwork right. But I still look at it, like you just said it, I still look at it as a great lesson. I'm still glad I did it.
Absolutely.
And I'm still proud of the output.
Yeah, of course. So you built the agency, you sold the agency. And before we get into that, when you started the agency, did you start it with selling it in mind right at the start? And if yes, did you build the agency around a sale?
I never built the agency to sell it.
Yeah.
I never thought it was a sellable product.
Okay.
I just enjoyed doing the work. And I worked with a load of incredibly creative, cool people. And I just enjoyed it. And about 10 years in to it, I started to get a bit of fatigue. Just because of the nature of, like, I guess, finding clients and, clients would leave and go work somewhere else. But, sometimes you build up a relationship with someone for 3 years and then they leave. And it was quite tough. 10 years in, I was a bit sick of it. And like I said, at that point, I brought someone else in to run it. And that was kind of a revelation for me. Because I thought that I was the only one that could lead this agency. If you lived in Hong Kong and you'd heard of Simon Squibb, you'd heard of his company Fluid. It was all, my identity was all linked to it. And it wasn't until I realized that I brought someone else in, they could actually run it better than me. That I became free. And I think that's something quite important. There's sometimes people themselves are the bottleneck to the growth of their own business.
I think a lot of people think that, actually, and it's something I've even thought myself, is my name being attached to the business a danger of selling the company in the future? And the reality is that as long as somebody else can run it and it doesn't depend on me, which it doesn't in the agency, then it's always going to be sellable to somebody else.
Well, what was interesting, when I convinced the person to come in and run the business, he was very well paid in a very high profile company. And I convinced him by explaining the profit of the business and the potential of the business. And he could have ownership, whereas where he was working was a big conglomerate. He would never have got ownership. And I said flippantly, I think one of the big four will buy this.
Yeah.
And I remember saying it at the time, and I've said it to him since, that I wasn't 100% convinced that was possible in my head. But as soon as I said it out loud, I don't know, it was like manifestation.
Yeah.
Because I feel like that moment led us to, like, really push it.
Yeah.
But I never wanted to sell it. Fine. I never believed selling it was the answer. I saw it as a cash flow cow at that point.
Fine.
And I enjoyed it. And I did leverage the team in that company to build other things.
Fine.
So I never intended to sell it.
Yeah.
I just made an offer I couldn't refuse.
So you got approached with an offer rather than you actually going.
Yeah, we didn't go out to sell it at all. In fact, and this might be interesting for your listeners because this kind of surprised me. I always looked at partnerships, and PwC wanted to do a client partnership program with us. And they've got access to the Fortune 500 clients, right? Mm-hmm. So they wanted to go to their clients and offer what we were offering. So we teamed up.
Interesting.
And as we were teaming up, the brilliant people at PwC, the penny dropped. They're like, well, why don't we just own a company like this?
Wow.
And then the partnership, it just became a natural, well, let's buy you. And initially I was like, I don't want to sell it.
Yep.
It's a great business making a lot of money. Let's keep it. And it services my other investments. And so I didn't want to lose the system. But the partnership became so big, it was the only answer.
So did they white label your services initially then?
Initially, yeah. Initially, I mean, you have to remember PwC is $1 billion brand.
Of course.
Right? So I don't know if people have heard of it, but it is $1 billion brand. And Fluid is not $1 billion brand.
Yes.
So initially they had Fluid powered by PwC. And over time, it becomes the PwC creative agency. So
PwC get in touch with you, or have you built a relationship with them prior to that? And if so, how do you establish a relationship with such a company?
It's just a natural progression when you start going up the food chain and you start working on strategy, not just execution.
Yeah.
You start getting in a room with people that are involved with the strategy, and often those are finance people.
Yes.
And so when you're talking about spending 50 million turning a company around, you have sensible people in the room.
Fine.
And those sensible people, McKinsey, Bain, which I have an issue with that particular company, but these big brands are sitting in the room almost like adults in the room as creative people sit there brainstorming about how you can fix everything with someone sitting there saying, sure, but how are we going to pay for it? You know, so the more you go up the food chain, the more these people come into your life, and frankly, the easier it is probably to sell your business.
Amazing. So you get this offer, you can't refuse it. Can you disclose how much?
I can't, but I can say it was more money than I'll ever need.
Awesome. Okay. Inconspicuous. But we're talking multiple millions.
Yes.
Right. And where does that leave you? Are you unfilled? What does that even feel like?
The deal takes about a year to go through.
Yeah.
So that was a weird time. Now, bear in mind, I wasn't running the business at this point. So it was more like there was a potential it wasn't going to happen for various reasons. And then it did happen. And the money dropped in my account. And that was it. And there was, as you'd expect, it was one of those bucket list ideas I think we all have as entrepreneurs, build a business up and sell it. And I had this kind of, oh my God, I never have to worry about money again.
Yeah.
Which I've been worried about money my whole life.
Yeah.
And suddenly I don't. And a few other things happened at the same time, which meant I had even more money coming in. A few startups had done well, businesses, I just suddenly had all this money. And I had this kind of exciting moment, as you'd expect, like winning the lottery. Like, wow, this is incredible. Like, it's turned into real money in the bank. And then I think it took about 4 months before I kind of had depression.
Yeah.
It was like my identity was sold.
Yeah.
I was no longer Simon that ran Fluid, no longer the person that built this agency up. I was the person that had sold his agency. But I was quite close to the people that worked there as well. So I suddenly had no reason to see them every day. And they moved into a big fancy office. And I remember going there, being very proud that this company I'd started with Helen, almost, as a way of getting to date her, had turned into this incredibly cool company. The offices were just magnificent, overlooking Hong Kong, just magnificent.
Awesome.
And I just remember walking in there being incredibly proud, but also a sense of sadness that this was no longer mine. And I can no longer say it was mine. So yeah, I mean, this is something I know, it might be hard for people listening who haven't sold their agency yet or thinking of setting a business to quite grasp. But I kind of regretted it for a little while.
Okay.
Because money, what can you do with it? It can't give you purpose. It can buy you stuff, but stuff can own you if you're not careful. So I did buy a fancy car and I did buy all these things, and I felt that these things owned me. They didn't really give me the purpose I felt I had when I owned these companies.
So how do you re-find that purpose? Of course, I know you've got an incredible movement going on right now, which would be great to talk about, but how do you get to that point? How do you re-find that purpose? Yeah.
Well, having a lot of money in the bank does help.
Of course.
And so, that people say money doesn't buy you happiness. I think that is true. But it does if you're happy. It buys you happiness if you're already happy. If you're unhappy, it will increase that unhappiness. Agreed. So what was good and what I was very privileged to do was take stock of what I want to do next. And I had the time to do that. So I had a baby and I became a full-time father. And I really enjoyed that. And I spent those, I guess, first year and a half to really think through what to do next, really dig deep. I went and had some therapy because I had some issues from when my mother kicked me out that I just buried to get through it. And that was really good for me. I really enjoyed having therapy. And I think basically then COVID hit and something clicked. I was reading about how there's 2 things I read that kind of blew my mind. One was about how technology is going to change everybody's lives and we're not even really aware of it. So AI, which now is becoming trendy, but I saw what AI was about to potentially do to the workforce and how we're not ready. People aren't ready to start their own thing once AI takes their job.
Yeah.
And they need to be ready.
Yeah.
It's definitely going to happen. If you're a copywriter right now, your job's gone in 2 years. AI is taking it.
Absolutely.
So, but people don't believe me, and I saw it when COVID hit. I saw an initial requirement, which was a lot of people initially in the F&B business suddenly couldn't go to work anymore, and they were sitting at home with the most powerful product ever invented in their hand, and they didn't know how to turn it into money. So I thought, I'm going to help those people. I have business knowledge. Roll the dice one more time. I'm going to help those people that need it for free. They can't find a job. The world's got fucked up, and I'm going to help them figure out what they're meant to do.
Yeah.
So my purpose, ironically, became to help people find their purpose.
Fine.
And I started the Purposeful Project that week after reading that article about how, one, technology like AI and cars that drive themselves is going to make 10 million people unemployable.
Yeah.
With their present skill set of driving a vehicle, now if that's all they have, they're going to be replaced by a machine.
Yeah.
And I wanted to help those people get ready for that moment. Yeah. And so that they could actually start something of their own that they love, big or small, that they're in control of, that can circumnavigate how AI will take away their job.
Awesome. I think coming from your position, I think for a lot of people have the ability and the capabilities to actually start something of their own and be independent in a business sense. But having somebody like yourself who's had that proof of concept, who's got that authority, telling them or helping them with that, even you could say the same thing to that person as anybody else, a family, friend member, a friend, it could say to that person. But coming from your place of authority, you're in a very unique position to be able to deliver that in a way that would resonate in a way that hadn't hit them before, which I think is awesome. And I've been out with you today. We gave someone some money, and you speak to people about starting businesses, and you're working towards you've got another kind of like a branded hashtag at the moment, don't you, on TikTok with giving away as much as you can, and giving back to people, which I think is incredible. And I don't think there's enough people at the moment right now who are actually giving to people without taking back and without being selfish to that. I think you are in a unique position where you have the ability to do that because you've already made your success. And so I think a lot of people would like to do that, but they haven't yet made it for themselves. But I still think it's incredibly admirable what you're doing.
Do you know what I've discovered in the last couple of years of doing what I'm doing is that there are some incredibly kind, nice, generous people out there. The news makes us feel like everyone's out to rob you and do something awful to you.
Yeah. Don't watch that.
But honestly, I have been blown away about how kind and generous and decent people are, and how many people have a dream that they've been told is not possible is equally sad to see. And I think just to touch on something you're talking about there, which I think is very important. I operate this model today, which is like the societal system structures things around like give and take. I help you, but you have to help me. Right?
Yes.
That's the system that we're told is the right framework to do things in life, or capitalistic structure, kind of like, I will only help you if you help me. What has liberated me from a lot of distress, pain, and disappointment is thinking about things differently, right? It's quite a selfish endeavor, this initially for me. Give without take, not give and take. Give without take means if I help you and I have no expectation of anything in return, I will not be disappointed. If I give you £10 and you don't pay it back and I'm expecting, I'm going to be disappointed. Oh, and you'll get stupid sayings pop up like, oh, no good deed goes unpunished and all that shit. And actually, I sleep better at night when I help people and I don't have any expectation of anything in return.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm doing it purely. I'm not doing it to manipulate.
Yes.
And I think a lot of people should pick up on this for their own health and well-being and enjoyment of existence. And it's not thought about enough. Right? We've been told the wrong thing. It's not about what you can get out of people. It's what you can give to people.
I agree. And I think that everybody should adopt that. I think that some people watching this would presume that it's easy to give without taking at all when you don't actually need to take anything at all anymore. Do you know what I mean?
I think that I used to think that way. And I think what I've realized running this experiment, if you like, is that I get so much more than I give because I don't expect anything in return. I have had so many opportunities and so much positive kindness, generosity, because I'm not expecting anything in return.
Fine.
So it's more like a social experiment. Maybe you could argue that I'm doing it for selfish reasons.
Yeah.
I want to be useful and I want to be seen, right? I don't want to fade away. I've got all this knowledge. I want to be useful. I want to be seen. It's selfish.
Yeah.
Equivalent selfish is if I give someone something and I expect something back in return and it doesn't happen, I feel annoyed. This has happened to me in my life. I'm sure it's happened to everybody listening. So it's not about he can do it because he's got money. I do it because I want to have a better life. And if people were listening, they pick up on this. It's not about how much you've got.
Yeah.
It's not about how much you give.
No.
It's about that attitude that someone right now, tonight, is sleeping on the street.
Yeah.
Someone tonight, probably listening to this, has a spare room. It wouldn't be the end of the world to offer that person who's sleeping in the freezing cold, -4 today, that room tonight. Now, when they're listening to this, they're going to think, well, that homeless person might stab me to death because the media's told you that's the example of something that happened once 10 years ago.
Yes.
Right? But that's the media brainwashing people into believing, right?
Yeah.
And what I'm trying to get to is, if you've got a spare room tonight, it's not going to cost you anything to give it to someone, is it? So I might have money. You can argue I can give money. Fine. But you can be kind, and it's not about money. I've seen cases where people now doing this give without take, where they just sit and listen to someone that's homeless, just someone that treats them like a human and listens to their story. Problem shared is a problem halved. It didn't cost anything to spend 20 minutes sitting with someone and listening to their story.
I think that everybody can give in their own unique way.
Exactly.
Whatever that may
it's
be.
not about you need to be rich to do it.
Of course not. Even when I first started my YouTube channel, my motto was I want to give more away for free than other people have you pay for. And that's the only reason the channel gained traction in the initial stage, because I was giving away a lot of free information. Now, granted, we launched an education business like down the line, but we still provide an incredible amount of value on YouTube. I remember we actually had someone that was homeless reach out once. We had a book. We used to have a book. It's outdated now, so I wouldn't recommend anyone getting it. And we sent it to this guy for free, and they managed to actually get clients. They got off the street from that content, which was incredible. It's an amazing feeling. But I would be lying if I said that I just give everything away, because I do have an educational business as well, and we hold something back, and we do profit from that as well. And I'd be really interested to get your opinion, being such a giving person, what your opinion is on the online education industry, which is a very booming industry at the moment. An industry, just as a caveat going into this, that I believe it should be heavily regulated. That isn't at the moment. But I'd be interested on your thought process behind that industry itself, what your opinions are on the industry.
It's a really tricky one, because I've got a lot of friends who sell online courses. So I think it's very important, like anything in life, not to generalize. So there are some online courses that bring a lot of value in this world. And I think if people need to earn a living to pay for that course, then they should charge for it.
Yes.
There's absolutely nothing wrong with it. I'm not here to judge those people. What I see far too much of, and what worries me, is that people are promising people will make you a millionaire. And then they sell them a £10,000 course.
Yes.
And then that doesn't make them a millionaire. So that person's told you have to go and get all your credit cards maxed out, and you pay £20,000, and now we'll make you a millionaire.
Of course.
And so I don't want people to be hoodwinked. And I think the truth is, all the content to start any business is online for free.
I absolutely agree.
It's just not put in one place. So what's really happening with nearly every course is that one of two things. Either it's all put into one place, which has value.
Yes.
And therefore, great, people can charge for it, or they can give it for free, depending on what their ultimate business model is. Because there is an argument, you'll get more views if you give it away for free. You'll get less views if you don't give it away for free. So what's your business model, right? You could argue it that way. It's not just a moral thing, it's a business model thing,
of
right?
Course.
And I think the other side of it is people that bring unique value, right? And they deserve to be paid for that unique value.
Yes.
So I think, to me, my core is I want to help people for free, because when I was 15 years old and I started a business, I desperately needed help. Desperately. I didn't know what I was doing. And I remember asking people for help, and they would say things like, if you don't pay attention. And I remember thinking, pay your fucking attention. I need help. I don't have the money to pay you now for help, but I need it desperately. And so many people in society get left behind because they can't afford that help. And I make a pledge that I will never charge people for help. If I want to make money, I will go start a company that makes money. Yes. I don't need to sell a course. Personally, not talking about anybody else. I don't need to sell a course to make money out of someone. I can help them for free, and I have content for free to help people. And if I want to make money, I'll go start a car hire company, or I'll open up a new type of coffee chain, or I'll build something on Web3 that builds out a new way of generating NFT art with AI.
Yeah.
I don't need to charge an individual to help them.
Yes.
And I don't want to leave anybody behind, rich or poor, by them not accessing that information. So that's just my core belief.
So I completely understand that. But what I would say off the back of it is, first of all, I mean, I do believe that with some people, not all people, but I think you're in a very unique position, and you were backed into a corner when you're 15 years old. You're in a very unique position where you have to make something work, and so you're going to take information, you're going to action it. But let's not pretend that 99% of people that watch self-help and business content online will never actually start a business. They like the idea of doing it more than they actually want to do the work. And so those people, generally speaking, and I know we say we can't generalize, but generally speaking, those people that aren't starting a business do need some skin in the game to get going. So I believe that as long as the person that has an educational product is providing value to people on the front end, enough for people to actually get started in their industry. The way I see it is, I would like somebody to earn enough money to actually be able to afford my program from the content I put out on YouTube. Get your first few clients, because I literally give that stuff. Here's the scripts, here's this is what you do. Go ahead and go do it. There's no hidden thing, right? Go get your first couple of clients. And then if you want the support and you want the back-end mentorship, not just the course, which is just one small part of it. If you want the back-end support, if you want to speak to someone every week, because I'm not in a unique position where I have sold a company for multiple millions and I can just give that, then you can have that additional support from there. So I think as long as you're providing value on the front end and you're still giving, and you're not baiting people, because I think there's a lot of people that bait people into with these massive offers, these huge guarantees, which are absolute bullshit, which I'm obviously completely against. But I do think that there is a strong role that online education does serve in giving people that skin in the game and pushing them and giving them that support network and that accountability that they actually take seriously, because they've invested in something. For those people that aren't in that position where they're pushed into a corner like you were, or like I was when I got into debt and I jumped into sales and had to master an industry that was new to me. And I think there's a lot of people that don't actually have that raw, I have to make this, or I have no other choice, or I can't eat and I can't be happy within my life, you know? And I think that the purpose is served there.
A lot to unpack you just said there. You've mentioned a lot of points there, and I believe in 78% of what you've said.
Yeah. What don't you believe in?
It's potentially controversial. All right,
me. I'm ready.
But you're missing a bit of knowledge, which is probably hard for a guru to hear.
Don't call me a guru.
But I mean, that's the truth.
But
sometimes on social media, we act as gurus, right? We got knowledge and we're sharing it.
Yeah.
So who helps the guru? Right? Another guru? Well, I have knowledge gaps too, right?
Of course.
But what I think you have going on, and this could be very complicated to explain, is you have what I call a limiting belief system inbuilt in you, right? And the best way to explain this would be, when I first started offering free webinars for people, I remember a lot of my friends who sell courses saying, no one will turn up.
Yeah.
No one's going to action your shit, Simon, because it's free. And no one values free.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I thought to myself, I'm going to try it anyway. Right? So we put together these webinars, which we still do today, every week. And I initially promoted the webinar, and we had about 80 people sign up, which our first webinar didn't sound too bad.
Yeah.
And then on the night, 12 people turned up. And there was a piece of me that thought, they're all right. You know, why didn't all those people turn up? I used to get paid £5,000 an hour to do what I was about to do for free.
Yeah.
Here's the interesting thing. Those 12 people that turned up, all attentive, all listened, and actually took action. And one of them said something to me at the end of the webinar that stuck with me. I have been on courses where I've been charged a lot of money and I've got no value. Just because you charge for it doesn't mean it's got value.
Of course.
Right. At the same time, I produced so much value in that they actually walked away with an ability to start something. Now, it was only 12 people. You could argue, well, shame it wasn't all 80. And
yes.
But But because they didn't pay for it, didn't mean they didn't take action. Now, here's the other thing that was really interesting, and I know you're ready to talk, but let me finish off the whole point, and then you can rebuttal me on this, right? The other thing that was really interesting. So we analysed, why did only 12 people turn up, right? So we did it again, and we made one change. This time, we sent people a text an hour before the webinar, letting them know that it was happening. And we had 212 people confirmed for the webinar, 212 people turn up.
Yeah.
And from that, people have started businesses. Now, I guess you can argue, well, I think in some respects, the industry a little bit hates me. I shouldn't be doing it for free. But I have noticed that it's not true at all that because people don't pay, they don't pay attention. And because they don't pay, they're not vested. There will always be, even people that have paid, that don't follow through.
Of course.
There will always be people. I know someone who paid £20,000 to a guru for a course that didn't take action after that course.
Well, 30% of, this is a true statistic, 30% of people that buy online courses don't make it past the first lesson.
Right, although 68% of stats are made up.
Yeah,
I believe you.
Yeah. But for 30% of our students at least.
But that's what I mean. So, I mean, that's why that in your own stat, I'm highlighting that it's not necessarily true that people invest. See, here's the best way of explaining.
I'm not saying that's a gospel. I'm absolutely not saying
that.
I know.
But it's also, you have to, the problem when I debate this with someone that's actually selling a course is you always have to justify it. You don't have to justify it, by the way. You have to make a living. That's how you make a living. That's fine. My brain works a bit differently. I don't need to charge money. I want to earn money, but I don't need to charge someone who can't afford it money, or even someone that can afford it money, to help them.
Yes.
I just want to help them.
Yes.
Right? And I will make money elsewhere.
Of course.
And so that to me is exciting. And if I was poor, I'd still do this.
Yes.
If I was poor, I'd just start a business as I've done in the past to make money. I started a business with ads on coasters. You put an ad on a drinks coaster, and we replaced all the Carlsberg and Heineken coasters, and we put them in bars, and I made millions. I can still run a system to help people learn business for free. I don't need to make money out of those people.
Fine. But what about for those people that actually do need to make money and they do find purpose in helping people? And don't charge above and beyond for their product. They have an exceptional product. Not talking about myself, talking, let's say, subjectively. And they over deliver to all their customers.
Brilliant.
They provide a fantastic guarantee.
But let's just not say that we need to charge people for them to have buy-in. That's all I'm saying.
Fine.
That's why I said 78% of what you said I agree with.
Fine.
Right. If there's someone with that frame, and I know loads of people like that, brilliant.
Yes.
Offer that course, bring value.
Fine.
I'm just saying, let's not try to justify it by saying, well, if people don't pay attention.
No, I don't think that's the case I don't think that's the case for everybody. I think it's the case for some people.
Well,
and I'm coming from both sides of the coin, putting a lot of way for free value on YouTube and also having a program. So I've seen and I've analysed an audience over the course of 5 years. I'm no guru to human psychology and understand how everybody works. I can only respond based on my experience.
You brought me on because you know I have these views.
Of course, and I said to you before you came on. I respect you
a lot. If this doesn't get edited out,
no,
I respect you a lot for having
I said I wanted to talk about this with you.
Yeah, because it's an interesting nuance, and I think people misunderstand me. I'm not against people making money from selling courses.
Yes.
I just don't want the narrative to be a bullshit narrative, which is if people pay, they pay attention.
Of course.
Right? Okay. Like you said, 30% of people that pay still don't do anything.
Absolutely.
So I think sometimes that's a narrative I object to, that people sell courses.
Fine.
I've got no problem with people selling courses. Just don't say that you can't offer it for free because people won't care.
Yes.
That's not true.
No, that's not. Of course, it's not. The reason you're not offering it for free is because it's a business.
Right. Well, that's fine. Yes. Just say that.
Yes.
But then when people say to me, because I remember it when I was 15, it hasn't changed.
Yeah.
Don't pay attention. That is not true.
Okay.
That is not the reason that you should be selling a course for a fee. That means you cut out a large slew of society that don't have the money to pay attention.
Absolutely.
Right? They can't pay to pay attention.
Which is why I believe it is the duty of anybody that has one of those businesses that they still can over-deliver and allow people to get themselves started.
Sure.
I provide the vehicle for people to actually do it by themselves. It is their choice if they want to take a step further. But everything that I provide, and I believe that anybody in the industry should and has a duty to provide value to people in a way that they can actually action it without having to invest any money. And I don't think that takes away from your product in itself. And I don't think enough people do that either. But I'm in agreement with you.
Yeah. And I think there's always, as I say, different ways of looking at things. There is an argument that if you put all this content that you've got on YouTube for free, you'd make more money from YouTube than you would charging people for the course.
In theory.
Well, you've never tried it.
No. I'm sure someone will.
Well, exactly. So if you don't do it, someone else will.
Yeah.
So are we saying all your stuff now is going to be free online?
It's going to be.
And I can publish it on the Purposeful Project as Learn Business for Free.
My YouTube channel's got more value than most of my competitors' programs. So
But you see what I mean, right? Sometimes we limit ourselves. Actually, ironically, we limit ourselves by charging a fee.
Yes.
That's the irony.
Yeah.
You know, and I remember this from the agency world. Like, to me, in agency world, the biggest, most valuable thing you can actually offer a client is an idea.
Mm-hmm.
But most agencies are selling execution.
Yes.
There's the irony.
Yeah.
The real value is the idea.
Of course.
So the execution, anyone can do the execution. Once you've got a brilliant idea, the execution is, okay, great. Anyone can do it. But the industry's got a bit mucked up because it hasn't realised the idea is what you should be charging £1 million for, not the execution.
Absolutely. Everyone gets lost in the service now. If you a final note just for anybody who's watching this who's in the agency industry, I'm conscious of time. I know you've got somewhere to be, but if you were starting an agency now, knowing what you know, having gone through what you did right now, what would you say are the 3 most important things to work on and have dialed in as an agency owner coming into the future of digital marketing?
So I need to get the questions in advance because I've got to come up with 3, not 2, not 5.
No, you've got to come up with 3.
It's got to be 3 and they've got to be amazing.
They've got to be incredible.
Say the question again because I heard it the way I wanted to hear it. So I want to make sure.
What would you say are the 3 most fundamental things that a new agency owner should have dialed in starting and coming into this industry now?
The number one thing would probably be purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what is the reason to do this?
Mm-hmm.
And it can't be money. So one of the things that flipped for me to illustrate this was when I first started the agency, we hired a lot of people and then they left.
Mm-hmm.
And I wondered why. And eventually I figured out that we were so busy focusing on the client, we weren't focusing enough on the creative people. So I actually changed the model. My client in my mind was the person working in the agency, the creative.
Mm-hmm.
And we were there to defend them. When clients said they want it tomorrow at 12 and it takes 3 weeks to do something, we would fight for that creative. We wouldn't let the client bully that creative.
Yeah.
So we ended up being really working for the creatives to protect them from the clients, ironically protecting the clients from themselves.
Yes.
So that purpose of like helping Helen as a creative ended up being really the business model, right? It wasn't about just making clients happy. Everyone has to make their client happy. Actually, for me, it was about, so having purpose really drove us because every time I saw a creative mistreated, they would come and work for us and I would help them fix that so that they were respected as they should be for their work and respected for their time, right? Not scope creep, all these things. Purpose.
Yes.
Right? And today I have an incredible purpose, going back to that 15-year-old me and helping that 15-year-old me.
Yeah.
Most of the people I'm helping are more like 28, but you know, helping that person who needs it,
of course,
who doesn't necessarily want to spend millions on a course. The second part, I always think people don't know where they're going.
Yes.
Right? And they limit themselves by number of employees. Shouldn't be that. I think making a very clear destination, what is success for you? Because otherwise you end up being permanently unhappy. Yeah. When you've got 3 people, not enough. 5 people, not enough. 10 people, not enough. Because you haven't really set what your parameters are. Is this a lifestyle business? Or is this something you want as a legacy? Is this something you want to build up so someone else can run and give you income without having to work it? Now, what is it you're building? Probably the second most important part after purpose is like your destination. And then third, I think, is really niching down. You know, like what is it? Like, again, I did this by accident, but initially we launched really as a digital agency.
Fine.
And then we grew into everything else. We ended up doing branding, campaigns, everything. But initially, we weren't seen as competition for a lot of the companies because we were doing digital and no one cared about that at that point. So clients were like, okay, we need to do a digital campaign. It's all separate in those days. They're like, okay, yeah, well, Ogilvy doesn't really do digital. This company, Fluid, I've heard they're really good. You know, so having that, owning that niche and allowed us to scale up into the bigger work. And I think that's even more important now with such a saturated market. You need to probably be really good, at Instagram.
Yes.
You know, like be brilliant at one thing that everyone says, if you want to do Instagram properly, you want to speak to those guys.
Love that.
So those are probably the 3.
Love that. Thank you so much, man. I really enjoyed this chat. Is there anything you want to share? I know you've got a good movement going on at the moment. If people want to follow you, what's the best place for them to get you? I'll put some links in the description.
I'm at Simon Squibb on every social media channel. And if you want to check out what we're doing, go to purposefulproject.com. And if you want to start a business, we'll help you for free.
Nice. Simon, thanks so much, man.
Cheers. Pleasure.
All the best.
Yeah,
See you later, guys.